Bearcat Blitz, how are we doing, everyone? Russ Eltman, your host, and Neil Meyer, my co-host, with you all on this back half of the week edition of the show, getting everybody ready for the Kansas Jayhawks matchup at home at Fifth Third Arena on Saturday afternoon. We have some fresh transfer portal additions, likely starting to wind down the transfer portal edition news with the latest offerings, maybe one or two more additions, a big one at that, literally and figuratively. We'll talk about him and the additions in the middle part of the show. We'll start the show this week with a quick recap of the worst showing in conference play since Cincinnati has entered the Big 12 as members of the basketball portion of things. Start all that, but first, I want to tell you about Bet Online. Bet Online is our trusted presenting sponsor. They continue to be the world's most trusted betting platform as well, and your number one source on online betting for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA, college basketball, to NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source for the new year. From touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks, BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here, and you can check out the Bearcats betting lines against Kansas on BetOnline when those drop later in the day on this Friday. Two teams that, Neil, are 3-25 combined, hitting the over on point total over-unders this season. So do with that information what you will. I'm very interested to see what point total Vegas sets, as they have not been able to set them low enough for Kansas in Bearcats games so far this season. We'll get to that in the second segment, though. But first, Neil, we have to start as I bring in Neil Meyer of rival Cincinnati site, the front office news. I'm, of course, with Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. Check us out at both of those platforms. 68-48, Neil, a loss at the hands of Baylor. BJ Edgecombe showed why he's one of the top freshmen in the country, 18 points on 7 of 13 shooting. Norchad Ormir, 18 points as well on 7 of 9 shooting. Baylor was down 2 key rotation players, but it didn't matter, Neil. They ran a 7-man rotation right down the throats of UC, destroyed them in the paint, 40-16, were supremely efficient, hit just enough threes, 5 of 14 to keep Cincinnati at bay. And once again, Neil, Aziz Bandaogo showed up in this game offensively, 4 for 4. Cincinnati now 6-1 all time when he scores 10-plus points in a game. It's the first loss I believe they've had in the Bandaogo era with him scoring in double figures. Outside of Aziz and Dan Skillings, who put up another 18-point performance, I believe his third in a row, UC is supremely lacking offensive impact from the rest of the roster, and that was most felt from a no-show essentially from Dylan Mitchell. His worst game as a Bearcat, first time putting up 0 points at Cincinnati. In 31 minutes, he had 4 turnovers, 2 rebounds, and 2 shots. That might be the worst game he's played in college as a starter. And then once again, man, Simas Lukosius is just a non-factor over the past few weeks, and a trend is slowly starting to become just what this offense is and what Simas Lukosius is. Neil, it's hard for us to say he's one of the better offensive players in the country when it's been over a month since one of those performances has rolled out.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Russ. And I mean, that's the biggest thing you take away from a game at Baylor, where Baylor essentially won start to finish. I mean, they were better in every facet of this game down in Waco, Texas on Tuesday. It was an eye-opening game for Cincinnati, to say the least, but a couple positives to take away. I thought the offensive rebounding was great. I thought that's what you want to pride on Aziz Bandaogo. You mentioned, I think he's starting to play his best basketball of his collegiate career right now. But then you get a great performance from Dan Skillings, especially Russ. You and I have talked about it with Dan Skillings. If he could just increase the three-point shooting percentage and become that elite scorer for Cincinnati, this team is capable of making a deep run. But every other counterpart has to contribute as well. And to see Dan Skillings go 5 from 7 from behind the arc, that's a great sign for Cincinnati. I mean, Dan Skillings is your leading three-point scorer right now, just to say the least. He's been the guy that stepped up time after time after time in conference play over the first 3 games. But they're going to need somebody to step up, especially on Saturday. Simas Lukosius was another non-factor in this one. Jizzle James was a non-factor in this one. Dylan Mitchell, you talked about it, was kind of a non-factor. The bench
Complete non-factor. I mean, he was horrific. He was horrific in this game. Absolutely horrific.
The bench continues to struggle for Cincinnati. They have to find ways to get these guys going. And right now, Russ, I think it's safe to say this team's lacking its confidence, so they got to find it quickly. Have to find it quickly, or else this Big 12 season could quickly take a spin, and a spin for the worst.
And Neil, it's tough to see where that fire lighting is going to come from outside of Wes Miller. Who is that leader on this team that is going to bring everybody up from the depths and bring them up with them out of the doldrums that they are experiencing right now? Last year, there were leaders on this team like that. There were guys that you could see.
You had the glue guy,
John Newman. You had veteran players that had veteran tournament experience, that had veteran NCAA experience, that had pelts on the wall in terms of making serious impact in winning moments to be able to make those kind of statements. That player doesn't really exist on the roster right now. There's not a mixture of entrenched in the program along with NCAA tournament success experience at the college level for Cincinnati to lean on right now. And it's largely going to fall on Wes Miller to lift his guys up and get them ready for what was just the toughest game of the season on Tuesday to another even tougher matchup against one of the best defenses in the country, one of the top 12 teams in the nation, and I believe the most experienced team that Cincinnati will face all year in terms of age and overall court time in college basketball from this Kansas outfit. It's not a must-win game. They're not at a crossroads necessarily, Neil, but like you mentioned, things could start spiraling, especially with a trip to altitude late night at Colorado coming up after Kansas.
Yeah, no, most certainly, Ross. And the biggest thing heading into Saturday, too, is you're going to need everybody at Fifth Third Arena. And depending on the weather situation, with all the snow that might be coming, you might not even know if it's going to be a sold-out crowd. It's announced as a sellout, but how many people will actually be able to make it, depending on the weather that we're getting, is going to play a factor, too. Because when a team is struggling like Cincinnati is, and you know you have 13,000 faithful fans behind you, you're going to need all 13,000 of them in a game like this. I mean, Kansas is one of the most experienced teams in the country. Hunter Dickinson's been around for 6 years. DeJuan Harris has been around for 6 years. Most of these guys have been around.
It's really just Flory Badunga is the only guy that doesn't have junior or higher experience in this rotation.
Right. And that's a guy that Cincinnati's very familiar with. Very familiar with. So
he'd be real useful right now, Neil, as the backup center. That is for sure. That is for sure. Speaking of Aziz Bandago in that center position, he's really the only center on the team making an impact right now. Arrington Page has stifled in his development, to say the least, 40-plus games into his college career.
Yeah, no, most certainly. You're definitely not getting the production you want out of AP right now. Obviously, coming into Big 12, he still is young, still a sophomore, but Cincinnati was expecting him to come in and make a bigger impact than what he has over the first 3 conference games and the first 14 games of the year. But heading into the Big 12, you know you're going to need depth. You know you're going to need it. Someone's going to have to step up there for Cincinnati. It's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out. Do they maybe try a smaller lineup and go 5 with Dylan Mitchell at the 5? Who knows? You never know in these kind of situations, but somebody's going to need to step up for Cincinnati. We need to find that guy who's going to come in and say, all right, I need a bucket. I need to stop. Let's take this thing back. Build the confidence up of the locker room, kind of fight for it. And right now, Russ, through the first 3 games of conference play, we haven't seen that guy yet outside of Dan Skillings, who's been trying to make that impact on both sides of the ball there. I mean, 3 straight games, 18 points, making an impact. I think now, Russ, we've kind of talked about it now that he's kind of fully getting back his feet under him after the knee injury. Took some time to warm up, but this is the Dan Skillings that everybody expected at the beginning of the season. But you got to have the counterparts around him. And if Cincinnati wants to win this game on Saturday, Russ, they're going to need all 13, 14 guys that will see the court.
And they're going to need 3 or 4 guys to be in double figures alongside Dan Skillings if he can continue his hot streak. He can't be the only guy scoring it and expect to win this game, despite how good both defenses are and both teams being a combined, as I mentioned at the top of the show, 3-25 hitting overs on point totals this season. To beat Kansas, it's still going to require a more consistent output, like you mentioned, Neil, across the board. And Jizzle James, they need more from him. They need more from him. 7.7 points per game, 32.2 effective field goal rate in conference play. That is downright horrific. Horrific. It's got to get better. You think it would get better. We haven't seen it get better yet. 3 games in. Same with Simas Lukosius. Similar stat line. 6 points per game, 36.8% effective field goal rate. Neil, in the first 5 games of the season, I believe Simas Lukosius had a 85 to 90% effective field goal rate in this first 5 games of the season, which effective field goal rate takes into account, kind of factors in free throws. Free throws and threes are factoring in as well, along with jump shots and all the other stuff. It's kind of an all-encompassing analytic metric, a little bit more accurate judge of how players are shooting and scoring than just field goal percentage. So bottom line is the backcourt has to get better. Somebody has to match Day Thomas's intensity. Day Thomas has been very good. He's been the only guy really able to get to the rim on offense, and he's been the only guy able to put up much of a great fight, especially against Baylor on defense. We'll see if they're able to turn that around, Neil, in a situation where right back on the bubble. They are only a part of 39 out of 53 brackets right now on the bracket matrix. That's essentially 76.8% chance right now to make the NCAA tournament after being on every single bracket. I'm pretty sure last week when I did this check-in, Cincinnati is the final 9 seed on the entire bracket matrix with an average of 9.21 ranking and just 39 out of 53 brackets total. Still, though, 20 games, Neil, in this conference run. They are likely going to play, as of right now, it looks like just 2 non-quad 1 or quad 2 games. So plenty of time to turn this around, plenty of time to get things back on track. Can somebody light a fire under this roster that isn't named Wes Miller at home in the biggest game of the season so far? This is bigger than Xavier. Mm-hmm. This is the biggest game of the season so far. If you can win this game, it washes away an 0-3 start. It gets you right back into the mix for the NCAA tournament. I would expect them to be right back up there among near 100% of those all certified brackets if they can get this win. A win that I think they're going to have a chance to do it. I wouldn't expect them to be a greater than 4 or 5 point underdog in this game once that betting line comes out later on Friday. Taking a quick break here on Bearcat Blitz, then getting to the football transfer portal editions and a quick preview and prediction on Kansas to close out the show. Neil, a busy few days in the transfer portal. We kind of expected that coming out of the new year, coming off of the holiday break. You get back into swing of things and start making some more additions to the roster. When we think about Christian Harrison now on the board, defensive back, kind of a mostly slot cornerback guy out of Tennessee, can play some box safety as well. Maybe see him play some of the star position for Cincinnati. He can fly around and mix around at a few different spots in the defensive backfield. Tawee Walker coming in to be the solidified thunder to Evan Pryor's lightning out of the Cincinnati backfield. I would expect Tawee Walker to be the number 1 ball carrier in terms of a total carry basis this coming season. Xavier Williams adds Middle Tennessee State, or Xavier Williams of Middle Tennessee State coming over, transferring to Cincinnati as a safety there. And on top of that, was there any more additions other than that I missed?
Xavier Williams
together when they're happening all in the same week. But I think it was just those 3 that happened since our last show. Overall, Neil, looking at those 3 additions, your takeaways, and I think another trio of solid players added to a roster that, in my opinion, I would expect 1 to 2 more additions, but it's looking pretty solidified going into spring ball, and a roster that I think, once again, is going to be expected to make a bowl game. And at this point, year 3, you should be winning 7 games at a program minimum, like you see.
Yeah, no, most certainly. And I mean, Russ, you're looking at the 3 transfers they brought in this week. Let's start with Christian Harrison. I think
run through each one.
I think that's the biggest pickup for Cincinnati in this, because since Christian Harrison this is a guy, it's not like he didn't play down at Tennessee. He played. He saw significant time. And
295 snaps in 2024.
And then you're able to get him to come to Cincinnati after taking visits to Texas A&M, Indiana. I believe Ole Miss was in there as well. That's a big time get for Cincinnati in the transfer portal, because what's even better, Russ, is he commits on Thursday. He was on campus on Tuesday. This is another thing where Cincinnati can get their guys on campus and has been able to lock them down very quickly. Very quickly. We saw it last year with Brendan Sorsby and a couple others. This year, it's a big-time addition in Christian Harrison in a position they desperately needed somebody to come in and be that guy that can come in and make an impact right away. Christian Harrison provides experience at the SEC level and can come in, play that slot cornerback, or he can play that box safety role. Kind of all over the place there in the secondary, but that's what you need. And he's the son of two-time Super Bowl winner Rodney Harrison, so that's pretty cool as well. So little fun fact there. And then I'm also really excited about Talwi Walker. I think that's going to be the lightning to Evan Pryor's thunder. They needed a guy who was a bell cow back, who was able to come in, bruise you, get you those tough 3 to 4 extra yards when you needed it, chip off those runs, change the tone of pace for a guy like Evan Pryor. Talwi Walker could come in and start right now for Cincinnati. He could be your Corey Kiner back, and then Evan Pryor be right there with him for the 1-2 tandem.
And he was a guy that benefited from, he's a veteran player. He's a guy that benefited from the Diego Pavia injunction and allowing those JUCO players one additional year of eligibility. That's the reason why Talwi Walker is still able to play college football.
Yeah, and that's huge, because in this situation, you never know what could happen with those JUCO situations and whatnot. But having that one extra year, I don't really think he got the fair shot at Oklahoma that he wanted. But then he comes to Wisconsin last season, or plays this season at Wisconsin, now come to Cincinnati. But for people who remember, Russ, he played in Nippert Stadium in 2023 versus Cincinnati in
with
the Big 12 opener. So it's kind of worth noting, like, he was already familiar with what that stadium's like. It's going to be interesting to see, for us to get that chance for us to kind of ask him, hey, what was your thoughts on the environment that day as a fan compared to what it is now playing here every other week. So it's going to be interesting in that aspect, but Cincinnati was looking for a bruiser back, and they get that in Talwi Walker. So that's huge. And then Xavier Williams, I don't know really what to expect. I know he had the one good year as a safety, but this was a converted quarterback from UCF. UCF transferred him to a defensive back this spring before he transferred to Middle Tennessee to play safety, where he finished an honorable mention all conference. So that's a great step in the development aspect of things. But I think that's going to be your depth piece kind of right there for Cincinnati in the secondary.
Right. He probably will mix into a lot. I expect him to mix in to a lot of the same spots that Harrison mixes into. They're both kind of similar players, similar profiles in where they lined up last year. He was Williams, 6'2", 205 pounds, 573 snaps last season. So a lot of experience at Middle Tennessee, all conference player, 67.9 PFF grade. And he played just like Harrison, a lot of box safety, kind of closer to the line of scrimmage, and then played in the slot as well every now and then. Like that addition a lot. I like the Harrison addition a lot. Anytime you can pull an SEC guy over to you is always going to be a good addition for the most part. I'll say DeAndre Buford didn't necessarily hasn't worked out supremely well coming over from Kentucky, but he's been serviceable at least and has been able to stay healthy for the most part. So you like to see that. Talwi Walker, I like this addition a lot. I think he's a bruiser. Like Neil said, he can really, really make guys think twice about trying to bring him down. 46 missed tackles forced in 2024. Not going to bring you a whole lot in the passing game, Neil, but they're not going to ask him to do a whole lot in the passing game. That's going to be left to Evan Pryor for the most part. Walker has 782 career offensive snaps of experience, ran for 864 yards and 10 touchdowns last season. 458 of those snaps were with Wisconsin last year as their leading rusher. So a strong veteran addition there. And overall, Neil, I like what we've seen out of the transfer portal. I think you and I expected this kind of talent to come in with how well UC's talent evaluation team, their recruiting staff, has evaluated talent out of both the higher level in terms of the SEC and the lower levels in terms of the Group of Five and the FCS. Maybe 1 to 2 more additions. Connor Moore is the big name we're looking out for right now. The number 1 ranked offensive tackle left on the board in the transfer portal. And he is reportedly made a visit to Cincinnati this week, or he had a meeting, has a visit lined up with Cincinnati. Yeah.
He visited this week, and then he went to Michigan
Wednesday.
State and Ohio State this weekend.
Yep, Montana State All-American left tackle, 6'5", 310 pounds, 2 years of eligibility left. Started all 16 games last season, 904 snaps at left tackle in 2024. That is a lot of snaps given the playoff format at the FCS level. Neil, he would be the plug-and-play left tackle after earning a 76.7 PFF grade in 2024. He would be, I would say, definitively making me expect Cincinnati to win 7+ games or more, 7+ games in 2025 if they're able to cap off the transfer portal cycle window with a guy like Connor Moore. And on top of that, other positions of need, the likely backup tight end behind Joe Royer and Gavin Grover, although maybe you like what Devin Zahersky, those guys can give you at the young spot in the tight end room. And other than that, Neil, I would have liked to see them add a bigger name, a bigger impact, a guy with a little bit more pelts on the wall at the edge, but that costs a lot of money, and that's a premier position. And I kind of like the strength and like the hierarchy at most of the other spots, given the resources available to Cincinnati in the transfer portal cycle.
Yeah, no, most certainly. Obviously, you might be looking at another backup tight end, a blocking tight end, depending on what they see from Gavin Grover and Devin Zahersky. I mean, both of those guys saw time in 2024. It's going to be interesting to see what they do from here. But if you can land Connor Moore, like you mentioned, this is a Cincinnati team that could go on and win 7 to 8 games in Big 12 play. And we said that last year, but this is a team now where you revamp in the transfer portal. You should be able to potentially make a bowl game this upcoming season with the guys and the talent you've added in the transfer portal. So it's going to be interesting. It really will be, Russ. And interesting, hopefully just the next week or so to see what this move will be for Connor Moore. But when you see schools like Ohio State in the mix, Michigan State in the mix, Cincinnati, it's going to get interesting to see what might come down. But, Russ, I'm really liking what they've done in the transfer portal this offseason.
When we look at the rankings so far for all of the transfer portal classes as of this recording on 24/7 Sports, Cincinnati 48th nationally and 11th in the Big 12 in terms of overall transfer portal points accrued by 24/7 Sports. So, yeah, that to me says you're a top 60 team, and if you're a top 60 team, you should be in a bowl game. So, get to a bowl. It's bowl or bust for Cincinnati. They better get to a bowl game, or it's just a complete abject failure of a season if they're not able to get 6 wins in a 12-game season for the third campaign in a row. Taking a quick break here and see if Cincinnati can break a 3-game losing streak on the basketball side of things in the matchup against Kansas. Final segment here on Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online. I'm your host, Russ Beltman. He is my co-host, Neil Meyer. Kansas on deck, Neil, for the Cincinnati Bearcats. They're coming to Fifth Third Arena for the first time, or well, not Fifth Third Arena, first time coming to Fifth Third Arena. They're arriving to Clifton for the first time since 1964. Kansas is 10th in the net rankings. I'm going off of my preview from yesterday, so this might have changed after when you're hearing this, but 10th in the net rankings and 10th on KenPom, while Cincinnati is now 36th in the net, and they were 33rd on KenPom yesterday. So a top 15 team versus a top 35 team. ESPN's matchup predictor has Cincinnati losing this contest 56.7% of the time. So a pretty nip-tuck battle expected. Neil, I am struggling to understand how Cincinnati is going to score 70 points for the first time in conference play this season against the Kansas team that is really good. 4th nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency on KenPom. They don't offensive rebounds a lot. They don't want to offensive rebound. They want to force teams to play half-court offense. They're, I think, in the bottom 100 nationally in overall offensive rebounding by design, because they just are willing to go back and rely on their half-court defense as opposed to trying to create more offensive opportunities against a rebounding team on the other side. I don't see how they score enough points to get this win. 11.4 assists per game allowed. That's 68th nationally. UC doesn't have an isolation scorer right now on the roster. They don't. There is no reliable isolation scorer on the team right now. So I don't know how they're going to be able to break down this half court defense that is so good at denying movement, at denying assists. It's just going to be really, really difficult, Neil, especially down low for Aziz Bandago, Dylan Mitchell, and Dan Skillings. Hunter Dickinson is one of the better centers in the country, 15.9 points per game, 10.4 rebounds, 1.6 blocks, 1.5 steals so far this season. You don't see over 3 stocks per game from many centers in the country. And he's answered by backup big freshman Flory Badunga, 6.5 points, 5.2 rebounds per game this season, and 1.2 blocks. Neil, they got 2 guys averaging 1.2 plus blocks per game. That's kind of all you need to know about how great this defense is from Kansas. I don't know how they get it done there. And then offensively for Kansas and defensively for Cincinnati to me is going to have to change their defensive style a little bit here, because I don't see how you can just let Kansas operate around the rim like they do so well. They've done so well this season and be able to keep pace. Like so far this season, they're ranked 86th in 2-point per shooting and 126th in 3-point shooting. To me, obviously, there's not a giant gap there, but you can't let Hunter Dickinson just get the ball down low. You cannot let these guards just operate out of the high post and insert the ball down low and attack the rim. It's just going to be death by 1,000 cuts, and it's going to probably lead to more foul shots, which can be a huge, huge killer for Cincinnati here. Kansas is taking only 13.2 free throws per game, and they're hitting 75.1% of those. You let them get up to 20, 21 free throws attempted in this one, you're dead on arrival, and you're not going to be able to make up the difference there. So I think you got to force outside shots. It's a UC defense that's elite at defending the outside shot, 24th nationally. Try to force them into their less efficient style of shooting. And I think you got to try to force them, unlike most opponents this season, to get up close to 33s. You want them taking that less efficient shot than the ones close to the rim. That's not something UC's been willing to do this season. They allow just 18 3-point attempts per game, 3rd fewest nationally. They're too efficient, Neil, in my eyes, to let these big men, let these veteran forwards work down low. And outside of Zeke Mayo, who is hitting 38.3% from deep, there's not a lot of guys that can really kill you from outside. So guard Zeke Mayo on the outside, be willing to let the other guys shoot. When you're playing a team as good as Kansas, Neil, you got to pick your poison and hope that it doesn't poison you to a loss. I think it will, though, ultimately be too much firepower from Kansas. Give me the Bearcats 71-63. What do you got tomorrow?
Yeah.
Give me the Jayhawks 71-63. Sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned it. Cincinnati's going to have their hands full with Hunter Dickinson. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, do they kind of sag the defense off a little bit and have Dylan Mitchell kind of help there, or Dan Skillings kind of help try to cause a double team there? But it's going to be something that comes down to it. We've seen it earlier in the season when Kansas's 3 losses have came, that those losses have came when teams have doubled off, helped guard Hunter Dickinson in the paint, and let Kansas shoot the 3 ball. They're not a very good 3-point shooting team, and everybody knows that.
If they shoot 40%, they shoot 40%.
Right.
You live and die by it, and you die by it that way. But you cannot let them shoot 75% with Hunter Dickinson dropping 30.
Yeah. No, most certainly. You can't let Hunter Dickinson get going there in the paint to where he finishes with a 28-10 kind of night, or a 28-12, whatever it might be. You got to find a way to take Hunter Dickinson out of the equation. Make him facilitate. Don't make him score. Make him facilitate and let the others try to do the damage. KJ Adams, I am worried about. I think him and Dylan Mitchell will be a fun matchup to watch. But because they're both kind of similar players, they both can guard 1 through 5 on the offensive end, and they can both go get you a bucket when you need to. But they're kind of similar players, so that matchup's going to be fun. But Kansas provides a whole load of problems. Their guards are very well. They have 5 guys who can score in double figures, Russ, and anytime you have 5 guys who can score in double figures or averaging double figures, means you're arguably probably one of the best teams in the country, you would think, right? And that's why Kansas is. They do a lot of things so well, but they have the experience. The experience is what's going to help Kansas in this game. But unfortunately, I got the Bearcats falling to 0-4. I got the Jayhawks 67-60.
Low scoring contest. I would, 3-25 to the over. Do with that what you will in this contest. I'm very interested to see what that total is set at later on this afternoon. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. We'll be back next week to discuss the Kansas results, tie up the transfer portal most likely, and get to some action against Colorado and Arizona State next Saturday, right, Neil? Yeah, they got Arizona State on the weekend at home.
Yep.
There you go. For Neil Meyer, I'm Russ Eltman. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three.